as of late, he's in the field of entrepreneurship, helping small and medium-sized enterprises protect their intellectual property from theft, with a focus on patents and trademarks. So I think this talk nicely fits into the general theme of today's session, where we have been focusing on IP. And also it will fit in well with what is going to come afterwards. So with that, I will now hand over the floor to Mark. Mark will give an introduction of what he does, and thereafter we will move into a bit of a Q&A. I've got some questions prepared for Mark because I saw his profile and certain questions came to my mind, and from a sustainability perspective, I thought these are certainly worth raising. And afterwards, we can also open the floor to you to raise your questions. So I know that we already have some questions that came up earlier. Please raise them with Mark, and I'm sure they will be addressed very well. So without further ado, I hand over control to Mark.
Thank you very much, Prof. And hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome. In the morning, you would have talked about intellectual property, possibly in a very conceptual sense. After all, NTU is an academic institution, and in the Flexi Masters, they will want to take an abstract academic view. We're going to take the opposite end of that conversation today. What actually happens on the ground? Why is idea theft a thing? And why is it so hard to stamp out? If you haven't yet scanned the QR code, now's your chance. You'll see lots of your colleagues and classmates have already done so. And the question there, wow, 1 in 10 of you says idea theft happens all the time. And half of you said, yes, it's happened to you at least once or twice. So firstly, those of you who voted, yes, this happens all the time, who was that? Who has raised that issue? Would you like to tell us a bit more about what happened?
Okay, actually, I do come up with, I'm a creative consultant,
Mm-hmm.
and I do come up with a lot of programs, and as in the past, I've also worked in, in management industry. So once you create something, right? I mean, because it's every time it's a new event, and you create something, and you can't go and IP everything, because it's a new concept. So the very next time you find that somebody else has already taken over the ideas and they have used it.
That's it. As a creative consultant, are you consulting on graphic design or animations, videos?
This is all programs, every event is different. I mean, this was in my past life, very long back, not now.
And it was such a disaster that you've changed industries.
Yes.
That's just a joke. And how may I address you?
My name is Vaji.
Vaji, thank you for that contribution. Anybody else have a similar experience? Yes, what happened in your case?
Last time when I was working in PR agencies in China, so we're working in MNCs, which are obviously a bit more expensive than the local boutiques. And a lot of times when they say, give us some ideas for pitch, we go all in, and then we realize, and they say they don't hire us, but a few months later down the road, they're using the same hashtag, same kind of influencers with recommended. So, but how do you prove that, right?
How do you prove it?
Yeah.
That's the question we're hoping to answer this afternoon. Thanks, Wendy. Any other similar contributions? Because quite a few of you have in fact said, yes, this has happened to you. What other examples do you have? Or you just anyhow vote? Who else has had some ideas being stolen? Whether creative industry, PR, perhaps if you're in the chemicals industry, have you ever had fragrance ideas stolen, for example? Or if you're a bank and you've put something together, maybe a new technology, and then next thing you know, the vendor has, the one who's supposed to implement your idea has taken it. Any other stories like that?
Yeah. So I'm in the fragrance industry,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm in the operational side of fragrance industry.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I do hear from our creative teams that they have ideas, with similar pitching ideas, and in some of these cases they have ideas being adopted to some extent,
Mm-hmm.
or modified to some extent, but it is still the very similar to the original pitch that they have had, especially with the smaller organizations that they tend to go into.
Yes, and you are...
My name is Garrett.
You're Garrett. Great, thank you for that contribution as well. And so you can see that there are all sorts of stories around IP theft, which is really where the rubber meets the road. So everything you're talking about later, for example, on trademarks, is an attempt to stop this sort of thing. But as Meiji said, how do you stop somebody from ripping off an idea which you haven't patented, you haven't trademarked? And, even if you have a written pitch to the client, they just need to change a few details, and even copyright law doesn't apply. So in the next hour, we're going to pluck that apart and discuss why this is a sustainability issue and how to ensure that your clients don't rip off your ideas. But we'll also look at the client side of the equation. Have any of you actually ever been accused of IP theft? I know that sounds incriminating, but self-incriminating. But being on the receiver end is actually also not that easy, right? Let's say, for example, you have two PR firms who completely independently of each other have come up with strikingly similar concepts. You're then the recipient of these. You then give your business to PR firm 1, only to have PR firm 2 come back and allege idea theft. So we're going to unpack that a little today so that as you head into further conversations around IP and sustainability, you have, I guess, the practical on-the-ground view of what actually happens. And once again, feel free to keep these ideas coming. So why is IP a sustainability issue? Well, this is how we usually describe sustainability. Right? Which one of these gets the most attention? Environment, right? And to some extent, you could say, well, that's legitimate because quite frankly, investment, compliance, transparency doesn't matter if we don't have a planet to live on. But ESG is there for a reason. That sustainability ought to carry the day in whatever business you're in. While we're busy saving the planet, how can we all be better about ethical sourcing? How can we make sure, for example, that if you have a pitch about a certain carbon capture technology, perhaps, or perhaps you've invented a new solar panel, yes, it's an E issue, but you then don't want the manufacturer, the OEM manufacturer of those panels to take your IP. Or if you're the manufacturer, you don't want prospective clients to take the IP, give it to a cheaper manufacturer. In truth, we cannot divorce the E from the S and the G. And there are, in fact, certain sustainability clauses in the Sustainable Development Goals which target IP quite specifically. Have a read. So in the first instance, right, SDG 8 and 8.3 in particular. By the way, you all know about the SDGs, right? How many SDGs are there? 17. How many subclauses are there? It's about 120. So while we all talk about the 17, safer use of water and cleaner air and all of those good things, in truth, there are actually many paragraphs underneath each of these, which if you're doing a Flexi Masters in Sustainability, it behoves you to read them. So I've highlighted 2 of them here, and take a look at words like decent job creation. How can we create decent jobs if the next time we pitch a creative idea that we're hoping to commercialize, somebody takes that idea, your plans to add headcount disappear. We didn't get the deal. Somebody else is doing it. Entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship, by definition, is about starting businesses which other people haven't yet started or doing things better than other competitors in the field. How can you do things better if you pitch your idea to somebody who then gives it to their kaki to implement? Right? Same with creativity. How are we creative and innovative if every time you pitch your idea to a client who then takes your ideas and says, thank you very much, sayonara, I'll just give it to my friend to execute? Right? So IP protection, idea theft are in fact sustainability issues. And if you're big and your organization is big on ethical sourcing, sure enough, you go to Starbucks and you buy some coffee which has been ethically produced. Starbucks can claim we are ethically sourcing our coffee from farmers who get paid a decent wage. But ethical sourcing extends far beyond that. And it isn't just about buying organically grown coffee. It's about ethically treating the ideas that are pitched to you. This is particularly important if you're a chief procurement officer or a chief sustainability officer, or perhaps even a chief human resources officer. How do you make sure that your staff, the ones that you've hired, respect your company's IP and make sure that your company's IP is protected when they go out? So IP protection is well and truly a sustainability matter, and it would be a bad thing if that wasn't the case. So what 1 or 2 words best describe the IP you produce in your industry? Here is your chance to once again add your comments. Here's the QR code once again. What 1 to 2 words best describe the IP you produce in your industry or your line of work? I'll give you 1 more minute. It's not been refreshed. How do you mean? You might have to click next on your device. Does that help? Yeah, okay. Cool. Well, we have a few of your ideas already. One of you said smart bins. Is that right? Who said smart bins? That sounds really interesting. That's you again? So that's what you moved out of after you stopped being a creative director. So what happened? What do these smart bins do?
Okay, this is still not yet patented. So, okay, but I can just give an overview. So, my company is into manufacturing smart bin, which actually at source is able to segregate the waste. So, if I'm like, here, even though we have bins for various purposes, not everybody's actually throwing accordingly. So, it's always mixed. The waste is always mixed.
Absolutely.
So this bin is able to identify whether it's paper, whether it's glass, or it is anything else, and it just at source it segregates it. So it's still under R&D, but that's what we are doing.
Fantastic. And yes, you would definitely want to get a patent for that. Right? Absolutely. Cool. Copywriting. Who of you wrote copywriting? That's the example that you gave earlier, isn't it? Anything else to add to that?
Like content that we write, for example, like they ask us to write like a blog post or like speech and all that.
Yes.
Then, especially like the client goes on to another into another company. Sometimes they also bring that idea or they bring like such similar content over. And again, especially that with ChatGPT now, right? It's ideating the same thing and we're just revolving around the same thing as well. So it's also quite tough to like say that was to say that 100% you took it from there. There's no way that we can prove that.
Yes, no way we can prove that. Listen carefully to some of these words your classmates are saying, because ultimately that's where the rubber meets the road. If you now go to a lawyer and say, hey, these guys have ripped off my ideas, how's the lawyer going to prove that? Right? Because again, they might just say, well, I came up with this myself. Where's your proof? Cool. We've got a lot of other things up here. Driverless ships. Wow, amazing. What sort of ships are these for?
Actually, there are. Actually, it's more like the ship owners. I'm actually in the recognized organization which surveys ships for safety. So we have some of our clients who are actually developing such shipyards developing driverless ships, but it's mainly within the port. I think they can't have driverless ships in the deep sea.
Not yet, right? Akan datang. Okay, cool. Green hydrogen production.
Me.
That's you as well? Wow, awesome. You can see how many different ideas people come up with. And it doesn't really matter what industry you are in. We are all dealing with IP today, in some form or other, which means that this isn't really just the purview of the creative industry. Everybody has a stake in this to some extent. So what usually happens during a pitch? Wendy, would you like to elaborate?
Well, I think it's similar for a lot of your in other industries. industries as well. So you get an RFP, request for proposal, right? And then they'll line up the agencies. They can either open it or they pre-select. And then you respond to the pitch with the ideas.
You go along with your deck.
Yeah,
Yes.
so it's interesting because like especially in China, those of you who also have worked there as well are working there. A lot of times one of the first few questions are asked, who knows who? Who from the client side knows who from the competitive agency? And from there I can then assess whether it's a legit or whether we want to go for it. Because a lot of times it's the relations that they have as well,
Yes.
when it's not as transparent.
And they might just be going through the motions of free bids.
It's just a beauty pageant sometimes.
Yes, and then they never have the intention of marrying you in that beauty
Just for
pageant.
procurement reasons.
That's it. Cool. So you've done the pitch. You then pack up all your materials, and then you head off. And what happens then?
You wait. You wait for they'll come back and either you clarify or then it's shortlist down to one or two. Then it becomes like a price war. They say the other side can do this. Can you match this price and all that? Yeah.
That's it. And did you have the same thing, Garrett, in the fragrance industry? Like you do the pitch and then you kind of go away and wait, or what does it look like for you?
Yeah, I would say I have deep knowledge in that field.
Because you're operations. Okay, cool. But is that roughly how this is? That somebody says, we want a new fragrance for our shampoo.
So typically, of course, you have to wait. Wait for a long time before you get the information. And there's always when the information is released, whether you win the pitch or the brief, it also depends on the final decision whether they send in an order to you.
Yes, that's it.
No, I think that postmates who work in procurement, they can probably offer the other point of view as well.
Yes, very happy to hear from you.
It's a bit worse for my industry where we have to submit the two envelope type of tender. So one of which actually is the technical proposal. So actually inside it contains a lot of know-hows, and you are actually forced to submit because without actually compliance to the submittal requirements when you're out of the deal. But if you submit, theoretically, they already have the solution. So
That's
depending
it.
on how much you want to, how much information you want to put in. If you put in too little, they will evaluate it as non-compliant. If you put in too much, you're giving everything away.
That's it. To borrow from the movie Dune, the worm is the spice. Right? You remember that. And how may I address you? You're
Ryan.
Ryan? And which industry are you in, Ryan?
In the water industry.
In the
Water industry.
water industry. Water treatment?
Yes, treatment pumps, water, wastewater, sludge.
Wow, once again, right? We see so many applications. Who else is here from procurement who would like to chime in? Wendy has dobbed you in. So, what's your experience?
So I am on the receiving end of the pitch.
Yes.
So usually what you will hear is you will hear multiple pitches, and you will have to evaluate which of the pitch best meets your business needs. And of course, there will be confidentiality being protected, but what you will intuitively do is you will take the best of each pitches and ask whether they can do something similar. Or if you know that there's IP involved, you may not directly talk about who the person is, but you may sort of bounce the idea off to the second person who is doing the pitch so that you get the best of everything.
The
So
lowest price.
I mean, that's the reality of it. So ultimately, of course, not all business needs can be met, but you will find and you will select the final person or the company that meets most of your objectives.
That's it. By the way, Wendy's brought some tomatoes for lunch. She's about to throw them at you. By the way, what is your name? Suzanne. Thank you for that contribution. Because, being on the receiving end is also not easy. It's Suzanne's job to make sure that she has the best possible product for her company. Right? So can we really blame the recipients who read your RFP documents and then kind of hunt them for doing the best for the company? Any other input, either on the pitch or receiving end? Anybody else from procurement?
On in another perspective, also on the receiving end, but I'm from the government sector. So we are more regulated in the sense that we are very goal people. So we are told that when we evaluate all the different proposals, we are supposed to have a certain amount of transparency.
and we hear from A, we do not divulge to B that we want this. And the evaluation has to be very transparent. If not, there is a stick out there that is a complaint to MOF. So that is what we fear the most, that is public complaint. So I guess the public scrutiny will be our stick to make sure that we do not divulge, we remain transparent and regulated when we want to select the right procurement.
And what is your name?
Manping.
Manping.
Yes.
Cool. Different perspectives. Thank you for sharing that. You know, the government has a terrible reputation for ripping off people's ideas. We're very happy that MOF is standing there with a big stick. Any other contributions? There are actually some famous landmarks around Singapore where the architects never got paid. No. There are some very famous landmarks. The fountain outside Capitol Tower, 168 Robinson Road. The architect who submitted it had exactly that situation that Ryan was saying. Right? What should this fountain look like? The pitch was the product. Declined. Architect never got paid. They just anyhow built. The canopy at Clarke Quay also reputedly was designed by somebody who then didn't get the project. Right? So a lot of this stuff you kind of hear around the traps all the time. And isn't this just the great irony that when we talk about law, we always think of it as very black and white, right? The law says this, you have to follow the law, otherwise you go to court and you get fined. But how many people actually get fined? How many people actually suffer some sort of sanction as a result of ripping off people's ideas? And so what you soon discover is that actually this whole issue of having your ideas stolen, this whole issue of not being able to be an entrepreneur in your creative or innovation space and get paid a fair, for the fair job that you do, is actually not a legal issue at all. It's a communication issue. Because if you have a conversation with the procurement officer who's running the beauty pageant, then perhaps you're able to avoid some of these issues. Here's the next question I'm asking you. Does the law fully protect your IP rights? Some of you seemingly have already voted. Let me put up the QR code one more time for those of you who haven't. Once again, you should just be able to add next on your phone to now add your voice. Does the law fully protect your IP rights? Is it so black and white that you can say, my pitch is 100% safe? My copy is 100% safe. My water purification plant is 100% safe. Good, maybe just a few more contributions. Cool. Well, it's rather telling that none of you have said, yes, we haven't got any slivers of green in this chart at all, which once again just goes to show how vexed this issue is. There is a school of thought that says, actually, there is no such thing as IP theft. Ideas are ephemeral. They're just everywhere, like the air we breathe, and therefore they're there for everybody to take. Well, you know, when you look at some of the world's biggest companies, all of their work is based on IP. They would beg to differ. These are the different types of IP protection options that the law gives you. And once again, as part of this course, you will probably find different discussions about these different aspects of the law. They all serve their purpose. But once again, put yourself in Wendy's shoes. You're responding to an RFP, you're about to give the pitch, right? Or Ryan, you submit your envelope with your ideas, you drop them into the tender box. Which of these is going to protect you? Let's run through them. What's a patent?
Is a protection of an inventive idea.
Yes, and how are patents granted? Yes, you go to IPOS and you say, I want a patent over this particular design, this particular technology, machinery, process. And then they take a couple of months. If you go for an international patent, possibly 18 months, 2 years. where they then compare your machinery, your process, your design to every other registered design that might be similar. And if there is no similarity, you get a patent. Is this going to work for Ryan when he submits his envelope with his ideas? Is this going to work for Wendy when she is taking part in an RFP? No, right? You're highly unlikely going to patent your pitch when it's about copywriting and articles, right? So patent law doesn't work when it comes to your pitches. Trademarks. What's a trademark? Brand, yes. So the Golden Arches, if you created a new restaurant and you gave it a similar logo, McDonald's Corporation is going to sue you for passing off, right? Or pretending that you are now McDonald's. This is why I always have to laugh when I drive past the Eastern Hotel. Couldn't they have been a bit more creative with their name? So, bottom line, is Wendy now going to be able to trademark her pitch? Is Ryan going to be able to trademark his designs? Are you going to trademark your driverless ships? Maybe a patent, right? A patent will probably work, but that'll take a long time. So, bottom line, if you're pitching something, trademarks don't work. Okay, so let's talk about copyright. What's copyright? Artistic expression. Perhaps a photograph, yes, and that particular design, that photo, you put a little C in the circle underneath it, and in theory, that's now yours. 3 months later, you then happen to chance upon your very own photo on somebody else's website. With copyright, you might be able to then take action. Breach of copyright. But once again, does copyright protect Ryan when he submits his pitch in the envelope? Does copyright protect Wendy?
Speeches we will put like copyright of company, like for myself I do training, so I put copyright, but what right is there? You know, is it legally enforceable?
Yes.
If they like take my course and they're going to do it themselves?
That's it.
I don't think I have legal recourse then.
That's the problem, because in theory, the person who's received your training curriculum, is it? So what do you train in, Wendy?
Communication.
Oh, communications, what an irony, right? And then they take your slides, and then, hey presto, next thing you see it on Udemy, where somebody has turned it into a course, right? And once again, I've got lots of stories to tell you about people who just rip off people's PowerPoint deck and then pass it off as their own. Is Wendy now going to be able to hire a lawyer and sue them for breach of copyright? Provided it's registered.
You can sue anyone, whether you win it or not.
Yes, whether you win is another question. And of course, Wendy will now be weighing up, do I sue these people with all the reputational issues that arise? Or do I just kind of let it go begrudgingly? I'll never work with them again. Plus, in theory, the recipients just need to change a few things about it, and there is a new product created from that copyright. Copyright does not need to be registered, but it certainly helps to communicate to the recipient that you take your IP seriously and that you are prepared to take action. That's not the conversation that any of us in the creative industries want to have, right? When you're giving a pitch, you don't want to then stand over your prospective client and say, you better not rip off my idea. And yet, suing them is not going to get you the results that you want. So let's look at the last one, non-disclosure agreements. Is that going to work? Sorry?
Work for the company to sue you if you review anything, like you leave a company or if you're a contractor and you sign this, I would assume it's legally binding if you are found to be erring of that.
Presumably. Okay, and how are you going to test that? You're going to have to wait until they actually rip it off and then try your luck. Do you have a lawyer, by the way, Right, so the first thing she actually has to do is find a lawyer who will take this on. Have you spoken to lawyers about these issues? Has any of you had this conversation?
Over the past 2 days.
Right, we're expecting Prof. Ko to jump in with his expertise any minute. Well, if you ask a lawyer, they'll tell you, you've got a 60% chance of winning. Maybe. True?
I think
Besides.
there was some news article about some private bankers, they actually downloaded the client data from the previous bank and moved to another bank, and the bank sued them. I think it was a few years ago.
Quite likely. I mean, if the banks steal each other's teams, you can expect that those teams will be bringing databases of clients. And that probably is a commercial issue, an espionage issue, possibly a breach of contract on top of that.
It's not an NDA, right?
Probably not, no. Besides, as a client, once again, picture yourself on the recipient end, right? Let's say you're Susanna. You get a whole bunch of pitches. You want the best for your company. Yeah, what are the chances that Wendy is going to sue you? And you're probably, as a recipient of these ideas, you're probably making some decisions, some judgments as to what is the propensity of me being sued for taking all these ideas and then giving them to my friend. This sort of stuff happens all the time. Why do you think the client side thinks they can get away with it? They have a big legal team, yes, why else? But then again, I'm sure Susanna doesn't want to trouble her legal eagles, right? Very complicated.
The size issue as well. Who is bigger in terms of
Yes.
who has more money?
Who's Wendy, right? She's just a boutique PR firm, whereas we are, take your pick, whatever, multinational. Yep, quite possible, right? So that goes on in people's heads. So once again, that's not a legal issue. That's a perception issue. Any others? Yeah, Susanna probably doesn't want to burn any bridges. So once again, she would be weighing that up in her mind, but it's not a legal issue.
Yeah, just to change a bit from the original pitch. I have clients that done that to us before. They told us that, and then they brought it to our competitors, and they said, can you just do similar and just take off this, take off that, and then we can work on that. So in the end, we lost that project.
Yes, very, very painful.
Yeah, it was very painful because we took so much effort in, pitching them, telling them the technology and how we would build it for them as well.
Yes.
Yeah, it was terrible.
That's it.
So NDA didn't work for us either.
You had an NDA?
Yeah, we did have NDA.
Wow, and so did you then try to follow up, take action?
Yeah, like what Naruka says, because it's going to be very expensive for us to fight against that, and the lawyers actually told us it's not worth the fight.
That's it. It's not worth the fight. Can you see, once again, this is not a black and white legal issue. There is a discussion that you then have internally or with your lawyer, where as a result, you then kind of make some decisions weighing these up. Tough, isn't it? Yes, madam.
I came from the buyer side of the house. More in-house counsel as a comms counsel. I mean, we get pitches all the time, right?
Yes.
But I think it's not just about we don't. I mean, at least for myself, I never, or my team members, we don't replicate or take everything just one for one, because I think we have integrity. Because eventually, when we ask for pitches or projects, we always go out there wanting to be a company of integrity. So if the agency, I mean the industry is small, right? The agencies find out that we're always copying ideas, then the next time we ask for a pitch, they will not submit their pitches. So we're very careful of not stealing ideas. We look at ideas, but we think through, and if we like the idea, we tend to go with the idea. Yeah.
That's it, and then you go with that benefit.
Because it's never right from the start, right? You need to continue, at least for creative, you need to continue to iterate until it becomes good. Yeah.
Yes, and you would then do that with the original pitch.
With the appointed agency. Yeah.
Who is the original pitch?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But you see, this is a matter of her integrity.
That's it.
But it's very convenient to say that, it's just quite convenient, conveniently say that it's just a coincidence that they have the same idea. And nobody can catch you or hold you responsible for their action.
That's it. That's it. And that ultimately, folks, is why this is such an important issue. All of these things that you've talked about slip through the cracks of all of these things. It's not worth to sue. Your own legal counsel will say that. If you've ever looked to sue somebody, the legal counsel would have also said to you, man, prevention is better than the cure, right? You should have taken initial steps to solve that. And yet, are you going to say to your prospective client, here's an NDA, we will not pitch unless you sign this. Once again, you're weighing this up in your mind and you're thinking, yeah, what if they don't sign it? The RFP. We'll definitely not get it then. So besides, we want the client to like our idea. We just don't want them to steal it. So yeah, maybe we won't put an NDA forward just in case that puts us at a disadvantage compared to all the other vendors who have not asked for an NDA. So I tell you what, let's not do an NDA. Once again, what we are talking about here is decisions, subjective decisions that people make in their heads. It's Susanna's subjective decision to say, wow, we've got all these great ideas. Let's find somebody who can do this for us. Right? It's your team's subjective decision, weighing up, do we do an NDA or not? Not black and white legal issues, human behavior. And this opens up an entirely new conversation. Because where there's human behavior, you can influence that. So how do we influence people into not ripping off our ideas, knowing that there is no such thing as a black and white legal solution? And here is one idea. A blockchain certificate. So we've spent the opening 20 minutes of our conversation discussing in detail that there is no watertight, black and white way to protect your ideas. But you can create deterrence. You can try to influence the procurement people. Nudge them in the way that, are you Gail by any chance?
Yes, I'm
right,
Gail, yeah.
right? In the way that Gail is thinking, hoping that the recipients of this realize they are being watched, right? You mentioned the word transparency earlier. What if our reputation goes down and then all of a sudden, instead of 6 competitive bids, we only get 2 because the previous other 4 who might have pitched say, we don't want anything to do with this company. People behave very differently when they know they're being watched. The reason why they think they can rip off your ideas in the white A2 size envelope is because there's no discussion. It's an anonymous transaction. You don't see who receives the envelope. The person who receives the envelope doesn't see you. You can influence this in these 4 ways. Let's look at them in turn. Usually what happens is that obscure reactive environment, right? Take you back once again to Wendy's pitch. She's received the RFP. She said, yes, we want to pitch for this business. She gets invited along to the beauty parade. She goes into the meeting room, finds out who knows who. It's a conversation. Does Wendy now bring up the conversation of IP? Probably not. She doesn't want to put herself at a disadvantage. She doesn't want to look like she's casting aspersions on this client that, I'm not so sure about you. But in truth, if we don't move the needle from an obscure reactive environment, the recipient will always hide behind that anonymity and say, it's all right. Wendy won't know which one of our team of 16 ripped off this idea. Let's just say that we got it from one of your friends. It's that anonymity that allows people to think that they can get away with it. The idea is to blow apart this anonymity, to actually have a clear, proactive conversation. And that's where the blockchain will help you. The second point, I think we can all agree, except for the lawyers who make tons of money of us, that deterrence, prevention, is better than the cure. Deterrence is better than litigation. The reason we have a small claims court in Singapore, along with many other jurisdictions, is precisely because litigation is expensive. Let's go for deterrence to avoid litigation. Imagine if everybody was like Gail. How do we persuade them to be like that? We'll beat you up afterwards, Suzanne. I'm just kidding, right? Influence versus enforcement. This is the same issue, that if you want to go along and say, hey, we had a deal, you said that you were going to protect our IP. It's after the fact. The idea's already been handed over. So the only thing we can try to do is influence the recipient before the transaction. And all of this does not have to sound like you're wielding the big stick. Deterrence isn't making insinuations. Deterrence isn't about making allegations before anything's even happened. Deterrence is about building those long-term strategic partnerships rather than having a short-term tactical transaction. And that goes for the buy side just as much as it does for the sell side. Once your idea is on the blockchain, then there is an opportunity to also transact your idea. And that's the subject for another conversation. If you're on the recipient side, have a look. There are 12 steps to being certified as an ethically sourcing buyer. And here are just some of those. If you can communicate to your vendors, we source ethically, we respect vendor IP, not only will you get more pitches, but you'll probably get more competitive pitches, and you'll get people who are willing to not charge pitch fees because they have some level of certainty that this company has said that they are going to do the right thing by your IP. At least there is an opportunity to then say, you know, it is actually part of our business value to treat vendor IP with respect. Maybe we can get even more pitches and better ideas when we give that certainty that we're not going to rip people off. That is the opener for our conversation, and Prof now says that he has lots of questions for me. But anyway, I'm very happy to take your questions as well. Thank you. So,
maybe I'll start with one question, which I was trying to see if you address that. What about there's a coincident similar idea? I mean, might happen. Probably it happened to myself.
Really? What happened?
Yeah, I mean, I design watches when I'm free. I came up with an idea in year 2020 about. The first piece of watch that I've designed with that solution, the design, and the other one is 2023. A few months back, I saw that similar concept. The thing is, I don't market it, so I do not believe that the guy copied mine. Because it's only one piece, it's for my daughter. And I did not copy his, right? So, what is my risk, or what if eventually there is going to be a case, right? Who owned this idea first? There's a possibility of I be sued. Of course, I was small fly, only one watch, but they probably say, don't waste your time. But when it comes to this situation, I mean, this is just a very small scale scenario, but
yes,
the bigger scale kind of thing, the chance of having similar ideas at different place, different time.
Yes. Very, very good point. And you know, there is even some research you can find online which suggests that the universe somehow conspires for different people to have the same idea. I'm not sure about that, but it's certainly possible. And again, if you're on the vendor side, right? Let's say you're a watchmaker and you receive your Chunhui, are you? CH, right? You receive his watch idea and then you receive somebody else's watch idea, which is strikingly similar. What usually happens? What usually happens on the vendor side? What would Suzanne do?
Just take the best option.
take the best option and then say, okay, well, wow, these are so similar. I'll take CH's, right? Or I'll take the other guy. What was the other guy's name?
Somewhere in the internet.
Somewhere on the internet. Okay. Internet Jack, right? I'll take Internet Jack's idea. CH then sees the big advertising poster when this watch is being commercialized. He then comes back to you and says, how dare you rip off my idea? So, what else could you do as a buyer? Because that obviously doesn't work. What else could you do? Let's say CH has not patented his watch. Why would he, right, go through that expense when he's only producing it for his daughter? His very lucky daughter to have a dad who's producing watches for her. Could he have trademarked the watch? No. Could he have done some sort of copyright on the drawing? Perhaps. But then, if Internet Jack has just changed a few details, a few parts of the design, your copyright's not valid. What about an NDA? But again, you're the buyer. You've received two very similar proposals. Even if you have signed an NDA, what are you going to do? This is again why the PitchMark certificate on the blockchain is so important. You've then received one where there is a name, email address, and phone number, and somebody who obviously takes their IP seriously. Seriously enough to register their IP. It's got a phone number on it. What are you going to do? How about you call them and say, hey, CH, thanks for your idea, but I got to tell you, by a remarkable coincidence, I got a very similar idea from Internet Jack just last week. Are you guys working together? Now, obviously, that's not a happy conversation, but it's much better than having CH breathe down my neck later on when I've unwittingly just chosen Internet Jack's idea and mass-produced it. The whole idea is to have a clear, proactive conversation so that everybody's on the same page as to who owns the IP. Best of all, you slip the certificate into the white envelope as you drop it into the tender box, so that the recipient is on notice. You are being watched. How you act matters. I care about my IP, and I've taken at least some steps to signal to you not to rip off my idea. We know that there's no black and white way to protect your ideas. All we can do is to defend the written expression of our ideas, to deter by influencing human behavior. Did you want to jump in? Did you want to say something else?
He could be the one that designed first.
Could also be, hey CH, thanks for your pitch, but by a remarkable coincidence, I have the same thing. What are we going to do? That conversation is still better than, oh, I'll just give it to my kaki to produce and hope CH doesn't notice. Okay, thank you. Any other ideas? Any other concerns? Any other questions? Sir?
So how much bite does the PitchMark have? It looks official, it has all the logos and all that. How much bite does it have?
Yes, so once again, let's look at our options. Yes, we can try to patent it, but I think we're in agreement that we're not going to be able to patent our curriculum. Okay, we can try to trademark it, but I mean that's really not going to work, right? In this case, NDA, does it work? No. Copyright. Change a few things. Do you remember that song, Sinead O'Connor, Nothing Compares to You? Do you remember that song? That was actually written by a guy initially, right? And then she just changed the male to female, and hey presto, she got away with not paying royalties. Right? So this sort of stuff happens. Knowing that there is no black and white protection, what are you now going to do? Are you now going to send off your PDF documents, your PowerPoint slides, your watch designs, your blueprints, hoping for the best? Hoping you're dealing with somebody like Gail, hoping that the person at the other end, like Suzanne, actually then receives the IP and does the right thing? Are you going to send a naked document? Or are you at least going to signal in the most polite but firm way, by the way, just letting you know, I've registered the certificate. We are working, once again, with influence and persuasion because the law, as you yourself voted earlier, doesn't work for us. in a pitch environment. So once again, you have some choices. What are you going to do? Now, then you asked, come again? Try, right? You then pass the NDA and you say, please sign this. And the buyer says, actually, well, gosh, if you're making us sign an NDA, none of the 14 other companies pitching are asking us to sign an NDA. Thanks anyway. We won't sign. The certificate does not require the recipient to acknowledge receipt. The certificate already asserts your claim of ownership over this idea. But I take your point, right? What bite does it have was the earlier question. How do you enforce it? Right. Yes, they will. And here's the reason why. If you're a lawyer and you then say, hey, you know, I sent this PowerPoint deck to the client and now I see they've created their own online course for it. The lawyer then says, okay, well, show me all the details, right? Well, what have you got? Like if I took this to court, what documents would I submit? You're going to submit a few emails? You've got nothing in writing where the lawyer can then say, right, this proves that you laid claim to this. This proves that you that you gave them a consideration license. So yeah, I am one step ahead of where I would be if you had just sent this document, as I say, naked, right? You've kind of just emailed it hoping for the best. That's not a strategy. Besides, the certificate is free. Why would you not do that? It's a good question though. Suzanne.
So I am trying to think of like from your company, your target audiences of your technology. So I'm thinking from a procurement standpoint, if I have your technology or your solution and I'm telling all my buyers that, oh, don't really just pitch to me because you are protected, I'm kind of limiting myself.
How's that?
Because I am binding myself to a lot more things. I mean, realistically speaking, compared to I'm not binded, and now I'm binded by not being able to do the best of everything. As a procurement person, I feel like there is something that's handcuffing me. Yes, it's the IP protection, which I agree is totally right. And from a procurement standpoint, disclaimer, we always protect and the confidentiality of the information because we don't want to get into trouble. And for long-term relationship, we don't want to be in a case where we are burning our bridges.
Absolutely.
So from a supplier standpoint, I feel like this is a binding solution on the procurement side. And if I'm on the buyer side, yes, it protects my pitch, but it kind of makes me very scary to the person who's procuring my service because it feels like, compared to someone who's more open, I'm very restricted. So I believe that this will have its application for certain industry more specifically than others. So I'm trying to understand which industry would this make most sense.
Sure. Well, virtually anybody who buys anything which involves IP. Let me pick up on this whole binding thing. You know, I feel bound now by this. If you let's say you produce tuna, tins of tuna, right, that you buy in the supermarket. Have you seen the dolphin safe badge on it? Yes, dolphin safe tuna. No dolphins were harmed in the fishing of this tuna. Looking at your logic, you are now saying, gosh, if we go for dolphin safe accreditation, then we are binding ourselves. Goodness, well, that will severely limit the ability for us to procure all this tuna. No. We don't want to put dolphin safe tuna on our cans. Really? Is that what you're saying? The whole point is to say we recognize that we as a large company have a duty to respect the IP of people who pitch their creative works for us. All those people who you've already heard over the last 45 minutes share their tales of woe. We recognize that there is a severe commercial impact when people's ideas get ripped off. We recognize that people get out of this business altogether when we rip off their ideas. We recognize that somebody is going to lose income, and we recognize that if we don't show that we are dolphin safe, I'm sure you understand the parallel, we are not going to get these pitches. Therefore, we gladly say we will take whatever steps we can to demonstrate that we are crispy clear like Gale. That we are the ones. Don't pitch to our competitors, pitch to us, because we're dolphin safe. I recognize that in some companies, this will require some cultural rethinks. But what's the alternative? Fewer pitches. There are some government agencies that have a reputation for ripping off people's ideas. And then what does the government do? What does GBiz do? It holds workshops trying to encourage vendors to pitch for government business. They wouldn't need encouraging if they could be sure that their ideas were going to be protected, respected. Any other questions?
So you mentioned just now like paid pitches, right? I'm not too sure whether every industry has that. So in a case like, if for example a client says pays me for my time, does it mean that they then own the ideas regardless of whether I have PitchMark? Because there's a payment involved now. Very good point. Who owns the idea? You know, once again, we could get into a philosophical conversation about whether ideas are ephemeral, right? They kind of exist in the universe somehow. But in truth, when you are the one who comes up with something, you want to be paid for it, then you need to lay claim to this in a way that other people understand that you claim this. If you don't claim it, how will anybody know? Now, you then go along to the recipient and say, here is the certificate along with my pitch. Let's talk about the pitch. The certificate in and of itself provides that spotlight where, once again, people behave differently when they're under the spotlight. They then receive the idea, right? And then they say, thanks, Wendy, for the pitch, but we're going to go with somebody else. You then... The difference if like you say a paid pitch, like you pay people to actually take part in the pitch. So by virtue of that, if it's paid, do they then own that idea? Because there's already a transaction.
Yes. The short answer is, have this conversation. The problem isn't that there is this black and white answer and people aren't respecting it. The problem is that people aren't talking about this. The certificate is the spark to that conversation. Hey, Wendy, I saw you've got the certificate in there. What's that about? Hopefully, you then have a conversation with the client where you then, once again, assert your IP rights. Of course, if you are paid, then that conversation might look very different, where the buyer says, come on, well, I'm paying you $20,000 for this creative pitch. We expect to own this IP. But at least there is a conversation. The problem half the time is, as I said, we send these naked documents, stick them in the envelope and hope for the best. And the outcome is exactly the stories that you have all shared this afternoon. Incidentally, our contention at PitchMark is that when you submit a pitch-marked pitch, that you do not charge a pitch fee. Yes, so there is no implication of a transfer of ownership. Yes, so the certificate codifies, formalizes this ownership. If you receive money for it, then obviously that raises some questions. So,
I mean, writing on to Suzanne's earlier point, I guess one of the thought I had is
where do we draw a line where we need to have this PitchMark or any protection? And since which, at the other extreme end, how do I encourage ideas and innovations? For example, in the area of sustainability, two companies come to me, similar ideas, but they have distinctive areas. How do we encourage this cross-pollination of ideas, which can end up being a better idea?
Absolutely. By raising your hand and saying, we have been certified as an ethical sourcing company. We've been certified that we have taken these essential 12 steps which demonstrate our respect for vendor IP. As part of this, we now have a process in place where if we do have contentious issues like similar watch designs or similar ChatGPT generated content, we now have a process in place to raise that rather than pretend that it never happened, drop it under the table, and then just take somebody's idea. Once again, the point is to influence the behavior of the recipient and to have a clear and proactive conversation, where currently it's obscure, kind of done anonymously, and there is no conversation at all. Good, I'm thrilled at all these questions. What else would you like to contribute?
Is it really just for deterrence or really enforceable? Like, let's say, do you have any cases really eventually the client steal the ideas, right? How do you enforce using the PitchMark?
Yes. Have you ever sued anybody for anything?
Going to.
Right, well, I'm going to take a seat for this story here. Cool, okay, going to. And what has your lawyer said?
I mean, lawyer usually they will assess whether we have a good chance as what described, right?
Yes, yes. And so what has the lawyer said? In order for you to have a good chance, what I need from you is?
Evidence.
Evidence, exactly. The PitchMark certificate serves as that evidence. And anybody on the receiving end who then says, oh, we didn't know. Well, yes, you did, because along with the PitchMark certificate comes a consideration license, which you, by virtue of opening this document, have agreed to. And the lawyer then says, good, I'm so glad you've got this. I mean, some of your email documentation might also then contribute, right? That we had a long back and forth with this client and they could not have not known. But remember, the whole point is to move this conversation away from litigation to deterrence. How do we get to a point where we never have to engage the lawyers to begin with? How do we get to a point where the recipient says, I've gone through the certification process, I am aware and I respect your IP, and if there's ever any issues, we have a process by which we can have a conversation. Isn't that much better for the long-term strategic relationship than to have to sue people, which costs you time, money, effort, probably some sleepless nights, and does nothing for the prospective relationship with the customer? That's what this is about, right? How do we move that conversation? Good luck, by the way. And I hope you get your millions. Right. How are we doing for time, by the way? We haven't had any time for his questions yet. Any other contributions? So.
Just one question. I think this is great. I just want to get the way to have the IP being protected. Is it just involving the certificate issuing, or is act as a crowd, so-called the knowledge retention space, so that when the clients or whoever receiving this information is knowing that he is being assessed through that space. Mm-hmm. That's crucial, because the certificate may be missed out or overlooked for whatever reasons. Mm-hmm. But making awareness to the reader is crucial.
Correct. Those are the two constituents, right? That on the vendor side, you are signaling very openly, I'm prepared to defend my IP rights. And on the buyer side, the certification program says, we are dolphin safe where IP recipients are concerned. There is an open conversation. Rather than, as I said, we just kind of hide this. We don't bring it up in case they don't like us bringing it up. Yeah, we can't get them to sign an NDA because then they'll have to get legal involved, and the pitch is already in 10 days from now. They'll never come back with a signed NDA in time. All of those issues disappear when we have a conversation. I repeat again, the idea is for influence and persuasion, because the law does not help us. And I would also add that Wendy now has a choice, right? Or if you're going along with your creative pitches, you now have a choice. You can say, here is my creative idea, and for $100,000, we will do all the printing, right? Or we will do all the graphic design, the poster design, the microsite, landing page, right? Whatever it is. Or you pay us $5,000 for the idea. We, using the blockchain, transfer these rights to you, and you now have the opportunity to choose your preferred printing and web design company. We still get paid for the idea. And better still, we don't even need to do all the printing and web design now, because they found somebody else. We still get paid just by coming up with the idea. The blockchain allows for the transfer of the certificate, And now the recipient owns it as though they came up with it. Once again, we are formalizing a process which is usually informal. And therefore, we're able to also segment the economic model. Wouldn't it be great if you're like a web design company, you never actually have to build any websites. You just come up with great ideas and earn your living that way. So, 3 questions, sir.
Sorry, just to continue my question. So, can I assume that your business model is that register is free, but when you have a transaction with a payer?
Correct. When there is a transaction, there is obviously a transaction fee. But actually, right now, we're on a mission. We're on a mission to get chief procurement officers to do the right thing. Right? And to say, yes, actually, we already do all of the 12 things in the certification program. This is easy for us. Let's just get the certification. Dolphin safe. That, imagine if we could do that, then the whole issue of people stealing ideas, wouldn't even come up. Unfortunately, not everybody is like Gail. God, she's got a big reputation to live up to now. Yes, so let's make sure that the CPOs do the right thing. Right, and then we had other questions. Madam.
What is the time and the cost involved in this process?
PitchMark certificates are free and it's an instant upload. You upload it, you instantly get your certificate, and your idea doesn't reside on the server.
But how does PitchMark ensure that this idea, which is being trademarked or copyrighted, is genuine on its own?
We cannot guarantee that, obviously. If you wanted to do that, get a patent, right? Where you then go to IPOS, go to your IP lawyer, they pay the fee, it's several $1,000s, right? How much is it to get a patent these days, Prof? Several $1,000s, right? Internationally, it's much more, and it's 18 months. So once again, you have a choice. If you want somebody in a patent office to look at your process, technology, whatever it is, and compare it to all of the other ideas, and you're prepared to wait, and you're prepared to pay, that option is open to you. But that's not going to help if you're in the creative industry and you're just doing a pitch.
But just to understand, like for example, Wendy said that she had a creative idea.
Mm-hmm.
And there's somebody else blocking the idea. And they actually created a patent for that or copyright for that. So it's already another breach of the whole issue.
It's problematic. All I can suggest is PitchMark your ideas as soon as possible, so that the date stamp on your blockchain certificate predates anything that anybody else PitchMarks. Arguably, you should be on PitchMark every day. PitchMark it, it's free. Right? And the blockchain certificate then allows you to have that proof. Anybody comes along later on and says, oh, I came up with that first. Yeah, but my certificate says that I did. We cannot possibly review all the ideas. Neither do we want to. Right? If we talk about stifling ideas, that would be it, right? To try to fit everything into a box. What we can do is to influence and persuade the recipients to do the right thing. What other questions do you have? Any other comments?
Maybe just one last question.
Prof, you had a question or 10. What did you want to ask?
I had so many, but I think we'll reserve it for another time.
Cool. Any other questions or comments?
So which countries does this cover currently?
Every country, because we are dealing with influencing and persuading the recipients. We are looking to make the recipient get the idea, get the PDF document, get the copyrighted designs, get the AutoCAD, and say, oh, what's this? Oh, okay. They've registered this, right? You're looking to trigger in their minds, hang on a minute, rather than pass this off to my kaki, I feel a little bit less comfortable about that. The law does not protect ideas. The law protects the written expression of ideas using the ways that we've already discussed. So much slips through the cracks. Just ask your classmates. That's why this is a communication issue, not a legal issue.
So you have this in international languages or
It's in English at the moment. But we have members in many countries around the world. In fact, you find a list of those countries on our website. People PitchMark stuff every day.
So I can basically just register anything that is my clients, and sometimes they have a different sets of we have different sets of building materials that are built together.
Yep.
So as long as I build something out of my own idea, you can just register it.
PitchMark it, upload it, get the certificate with the date stamp. And before you say, oh, well, I should just stick it in an envelope and mail it to myself, then I have a postmark. Well, okay, firstly, that's a very 1960s way of going about it. But also, the recipient doesn't know you've done that. There is no deterrence effect. Right? The only way that this will then be useful is if you then took it to a lawyer after your idea has been ripped off and said, look, I have a postmark on this idea showing that I came up with this idea first. And then the client says, well, we didn't know about that. Influence and persuasion to deter. The only thing I would say is that if you PitchMark stuff, don't change the file after. Remember, we're dealing with the blockchain here. That means that your certificate has a hash. Do you all know what a hash is in blockchain terms, right? It's the lengthy code, right? That gives you your unique number. If the client then clicks on verify certificate, uploads the file that you have sent them, it has to match. If you change even a comma in this document, the certificate will no longer be valid. Yes, and that's kind of the proof of ownership or proof of creation that the blockchain allows you to do. So only PitchMark it once the document is actually complete, is the point.
Another question is, for example, I've already sent this document to my client, and now that I have known that I can do something like that, and I PitchMark the exact same document that I've sent it to him before, but he doesn't have that idea that I've PitchMarked it before.
Yeah.
So does it still work?
It does, but remember, it's all about deterrence. So you might want to say, oh, by the way, just letting you know, here's this up. Sorry, forgot to attach, the certificate, here it is. Hopefully he'll then say, oh, really? Oh, well, what's this? Well, it's just our assertion of ownership of this idea. That's all. Hint, hint. Yes, so hopefully he then thinks twice about, okay, maybe I don't get my car key to produce it. And
how much does it cost?
Free. The certificate is free.
Okay, may I suggest that we take the questions to tea, because tea is ready, and if you're keen, we can take an early tea break, which should also give you a bit of opportunity to work on your group projects, right? So please join me in thanking Mark for his exceptional presentation and, of course, his practical insights. And what I've learned from this is that sustainability is a much broader concept than what we would originally conceptualize. It's not all about the E. I think the S and the G have an equal, if not more important role to play. And another thing, which I have the privilege of saying because I'm not a practicing lawyer, is that the law is not perfect and there are always cracks. And at times when this happens, the best thing to do is to avoid disputes and also to turn to technology to protect yourselves. So I think that is the theme of this session. And finally, also the fact that IP theft itself is a sustainability issue, right? Which is, I think, something that we don't think of too often. So with that, I think we will end the session with Mark. But before we do so, I have a little token from NBS to Mark. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. You see how different he acts when he's being watched.
It's all about communication.
That's it.